Hi, I'm Kerry Watson, and this time out, I'm going to be talking about The Once Upon a Time World by Jonathan Miles, which is a history of the French Riviera, which just came out last year. Now, any history of that part of the world, whether it's a long form magazine article or documentary, uh, usually amounts to a collection of anecdotes about the rich and famous, the rich and notorious, who've lived along that, what amounts to an 80-mile strip of French coast. And so does this one largely. It's packed with anecdotal material about these people, ranging from the scandalous to the informative, which isn't a bad thing because, of course, the Riviera has always been a playground. So naturally, most of the history that's going to arise from that kind of place is going to be of the lighter variety, or the salacious, or the mildly scandalous. However, Miles does do a couple of interesting things that perhaps other histories of the Riviera haven't done, in that he points out, or at least he brings to light, the idea that one of the important aspects of that area was the impact it had on artists, particularly on visual artists, painters, Matisse, Picasso, and so on, because they were coming from places that were simply did not have that kind of light, that kind of openness of view and of landscape. And for many of the people who came there in the early 1900s, it was a revelation that this kind of landscape was available to be enjoyed. And that became reflected in their work, particularly the visual arts. But at several points, Miles lays out evidence that it also influences things as diverse as ballet and fiction, the writing of fiction. Of course, the Riviera started out as essentially a British invention. A Lord Brougham founded Cannes, I should say. And it was where Brits escaped the winter in England. And also, increasingly, or for some, it was a place to come and recuperate from illness, tuberculosis being the main one. Not that the Riviera, the climate on the Riviera actually had any beneficial effect on that disease, but it maybe made their last months and years more pleasant if they were there. Although Miles doesn't point out that for a lot of these people who came for their health, what they were really escaping was pollution. Because, of course, in the late 1800s, you're starting to deal with cities in England, specifically, and also Northern Europe. They were getting increasingly and horribly polluted from coal-fired everything. The famous pea soup fogs of London, of course, are simply caused by the burning of fossil fuels, temperature inversions, fog, et cetera, et cetera. We all know about that by now, but they must have been incredibly horrible. And if you're rich enough, you could escape somewhere with clean air and lots of sunlight, something you might not see for months at a time in Northern Europe. So, as I said, it's a lot of anecdotes about the rich and famous, all the way from Isadora Duncan to Elton John and so on. It's an excellent read, light, informative, more in depth than most things you'll find about the Riviera. The only maybe disappointing part I found was that he sort of skims over the era of mass tourism, which, reading between the lines, he finds a bit distasteful maybe, or not worthy of interest. And yet, that is the Riviera experienced by the vast majority of people. And although there is more of a record of events from a upper middle class perspective, the rich and the famous, who leave behind their diaries and, of course, the newspaper and magazine accounts of their doings. It's likely that the change in scenery for people in the post-World War II era to come down to the Riviera the middle classes, the working classes, it was more profound. It was a more profound shock for them than it was for, of course, rich people 50 years earlier who were used to making journeys, expensive vacations, which simply were not available to the vast majority of people prior to World War II. So some kind of oral history from the point of view of people who worked for an hourly wage in the 1950s and 60s and 70s who journeyed to the Riviera for the first time once it became cheap enough and they were making enough money to afford to make that trip would have been very interesting. But that's skimmed over, or not even dealt with. But otherwise, that's a minor quibble. But yes, a book I quite enjoyed, and I'd recommend it. Promo time now. My own book. And The Skeleton Palms, noir thriller, and isn't that a lovely cover? My daughter designed that, along with help from a friend. Anyway, if you're any kind of social media reviewer, drop me a line and I'll send you a review copy. Thanks. See you next time.